In the videos that I put up here, you're going to find a lot of discussion about how to use tarot cards, what they're good for, which decks are good for what. But even in the communities that I travel in, that are using tarot all the time for personal development, spiritual revelation, we don't have a whole lot of conversations about what it is that makes tarot spiritual in itself. Why is it a good tool for these kinds of explorations? Do we just accept that as granted because other people have said so, or is there really something behind it that we can describe and explain to one another? The thing that has been a huge theme in spirituality for thousands of years is the question of what we do with the material world. If we have a sense that there is a spiritual dimension that influences the material stuff around us, that we have some access to and contact with through senses that aren't exactly physical, then what does tarot have to do with this question of where our material world meets the spiritual world? The answer to this question of why is tarot spiritual is a lot of the reason that I focus more on the old Marseille deck rather than newer traditions that have been developed in modern times. The basic reason is that the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which has become the modern model for most of the decks that have come after, the way that the numbers are depicted and the concepts are presented in it is that in the suit cards, or the minor arcana, there seems to be this sense of escalation, that as you go from 1 to 10, you've just got more. And by the time you get to the higher numbers, you've just got too much. That there is a burden or an excess that comes along with getting to the extreme numbers in the suits. And that once you're at the top, you've just got a lot. That's all there is to it. And in the trump cards, or the major cards, there's a sense that each one is encoded spiritually with ideas from all over the place that makes each one a spiritual focal point. And there's no secret as to why Arthur Waite presented the deck this way. He was part of a spiritualist group that was using the deck in order to describe stations in their initiations. So as you got higher, you really were higher in a hierarchy of how their group worked. I don't personally find that life works that way. Once you achieve something, you move beyond an obstacle or a boundary, there is always more to do. And it's been my experience that even as I get better at things that I have put a lot of energy and learning into, that there's always more to discover. And there are always things that I am missing that I could have more perspective on. And the more that I learn, the more I realize that I can't have it all. That my particular perspective means that I'm moving in a certain direction. I know a great deal about where I've been, and I've got a sense of where I want to go, but I have to keep going in that direction. I can't weave in and out, go in winding circles around myself if I want to go somewhere that feels like progress. The nice thing is, if you don't think that things are moving in a single progressive direction, then you can wind around. You can take samples from everything in your life and everything that you want to explore at whatever level of skill and enjoy it for what it is without feeling like there's some end or conclusion to it. So I feel that the white deck presupposes an ultimate conclusion to both our material and spiritual explorations, a single point that everybody's driving to. And I'm not convinced that that is the case. It doesn't really reflect the experience that I've had. And more than this, it doesn't reflect the forms of indigenous, traditional spiritual interaction that a lot of my close friends are deeply invested in, whose families have been practicing in this way for hundreds of years, well before the occultism boom. My hope is to be able to have fruitful conversations with them, and also to have a sense that my life as a human is interacting with the material world in a way that goes further back into my traditions and my roots than the abstract intellectualism that came into spirituality, really starting with Egyptian and Greek ideas back in the ancient Near East. I want to do better than abstraction. I want to be part of this physical world and utilize my spirituality to process it and improve it. The Marseille deck suggests that everything is moving in cycles. Cycles that repeat in some sense, but that transform with every repetition. So that you have this option of going down a path, learning what you can from it, from your particular perspective. And then, once you've gotten as much as you can from that path, you release yourself from it and move on to another thing. You move on with all of the experience, the understanding that you have gained, this shift in perspective that trying things and exploring offers to a person. But then you continue on, and all of these changes make up who you are. The Marseille deck presents a form of spirituality in which life and the material world are in process. Every living thing is constantly changing the nature of our experience of the material. So that as species transform and respond to their natural environment, as we come up with new ways to think about the material world, utilize the things in it, transform them for our convenience, we are all processing the material. And in the moment of this process, we often will say, well, this part of the process is good or this part is bad. We are very much welcome to our opinions and to the struggle involved with determining what's going to be good in the long term for the process, what we need for today in our own personal process. And both in that little cycle of hour to hour, day to day, the Marseille describes different instances of how we deal with those moments. It also describes the larger cycle of our entire life, centuries of time, thousands of years of processing the material world through our spiritual experiences, and the way that these feed onto one another in the course of wisdom that doesn't change very much in its foundation, but that we find different ways to express and discover and different metaphors to use in order to understand what it's doing to us and how we want to participate in it. The beauty of spirituality and tarot is this cyclical process. We are all in the process of processing. Our bodies are a particular manifestation of spiritual reality, and we are using them to make physical statements, to make realities, to make stuff that we leave behind, that other people interact with, in order to then get an understanding of where their spiritual experience is taking them. The beauty of it processing rather than just being in a single direction, is that we don't have to know everything about the process. We don't have to be 100% conscious of everything that we do and why we do it. That can be a helpful part of the process, but it's not so essential that you've got to define everything as you're going through it. Often, your process, the things that you do unconsciously, are going to have profound effects on yourself and on others, and it's a question of not revealing every single thing, but rather what revelations come to us personally that make our spiritual journey important, and the way that we inspire one another to take different perspectives on what we're doing, what we're seeing, what's going on, that makes the process of going through it together so very valuable and important. We can't process alone. We process as communities, as families. We inherit the world as a group, and so we have to encounter it, discuss it, exchange what we see in it as groups. So I hope this has been helpful in offering you some grounding as to what spiritual concepts inform tarot and what to think about as you're using it for readings and meditation. It's not a question of finding your singular place in one process that's bringing you from a point in time to an end in time, but a question of how the different cycles in your life are interacting with each other, how your cycle is interacting with the cycle of another person, and what you can learn from your respective ways of seeing at that point in the cycle based on everything that you've gotten from the other cycles you've been a part of. Thank you so much for listening. Please contact me for readings through newelltarot.com or for general spiritual education and development in your spiritual skills. It is always my pleasure, and I look forward to working with you. Take care and have a great day.